The vote. The Reverend Dr. William Barber, the president of the North Carolina NAACP, and Congressman G.K. Butterfield, representing North Carolina's 1st Congressional District. Thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you, Reverend Al.
Reverend Barber, let me start with you. Your state now has the country's most radical voter suppression law. How are you fighting back?
Well, you know, Reverend Al, what they're doing is they're fighting to roll back what we won. We've been organizing and fighting with the NAACP and more than 150 organizations, and we won same-day registration, early voting, and Sunday voting. What we are seeing now is extremism on steroids, Jim Crow 2. They have rolled back same-day registration, early voting, Sunday voting. They're wanting to deny 17-year-olds from pre-registering. They want to end public financing. An all-out attempt. They passed a voter ID law that's worse than Alabama and South Carolina. For 13 weeks, we had thousands of people come to the legislature. More than 1,000 people registered. We're moving across the state. Within 1 hour after the governor signed this monster bill, we had already filed suit, working with the NAACP and with the Advancement Project. We have 13 rallies tomorrow in the 13th Congressional District. We're organizing massively on our college campus, and we'll have a massive march on the governor's mansion in the early part of September. We are not going backwards, Reverend Al. We say forward together, not one step back. And we will win in the courts. We will organize in the street. We will fire up our pulpits. We have the most massive coalition right here in North Carolina. We're building a movement from the bottom up. This is our Selma, and we will stand our ground.
Now, Congressman Butterfield, you and Reverend Barber was with us Saturday here at the march. And but tell me, that's what we're doing with agitation. How do we stop this with legislation? What's going on in the Congress? What can go on?
Well, first of all, Reverend Sharpton, let me thank you for putting a spotlight on what's happening in North Carolina. We now indeed have the worst election laws in the United States. It happened very quickly. 3 things were standing in the way of the Republicans doing this. Number one, they didn't control the legislature. Now they do. They were not in the governor's mansion. Now they are. And then Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act was invalidated by the Supreme Court on June the 25th. And by July 25th, these laws had been enacted. And so we have a real struggle, and Reverend Barber and the conference of the NAACP has worked very hard in organizing Moral Mondays. But now the Attorney General of the United States must act. I've written a letter to Mr. Holder asking for Justice Department intervention. I spoke to him Saturday at the March in Washington and again reiterated the importance of bringing federal action against North Carolina, because we have thousands of not just African Americans, but students and senior citizens and many other groups who are now going to be disenfranchised.
Now, Reverend Barber, you have put together an unusually effective coalition of all races, all ages, all religion, and have been doing Moral Monday, civil disobedience. Many of us are coming in to support that after this national march. How important is activism to achieving this?
Well, it's extremely important, and it's extremely important that we build it indigenously from the bottom up, from Montgomery up, not from Washington down. It's important that it's broad, that it's deep, that it's diverse. It's important that we frame the issues, not necessarily Republican and Democrat, but who's immoral versus who's moral, who's extreme versus who's constitutional, that we root it in our deepest biblical values and our deepest moral values. And that's why we're seeing Republicans and Democrats who are coming together. Reverend Al, we were in Mitchell County a few weeks ago talking about these issues, not just voting, but the attack on Medicaid, the attack on the poor, the attack on public education. And in a county that's 99% white, 89% Republican, the Republican chair renounced the party, sent his daughter to bring people to Moral Monday, and they're organizing up there and joining forces with it, and then join 10,000 people in Asheville. What we need is the support for people to support indigenous leadership as we build a movement state by state by state.
Now, and that's the only way it's going to work. That's the way it worked 50 years ago. Right. Congressman, conservative Phyllis Schlafly, she defended the North Carolina voting law by saying, I'm going to quote her, "The reduction in the number of days allowed for early voting is particularly important because early voting plays a major role in Obama's game plan. The Obama technocrats have developed an efficient system of identifying prospective Obama voters. So early voting is an essential component of the Democrats' get out the vote. I mean, she flat out admits the real reason for these laws is to actually keep people from voting.
Reverend Sharpton, I need to just pull the Band-Aid off of this wound and explain to you what's going on in North Carolina. The Republicans did not expect President Obama to win North Carolina in 2008. It was a complete surprise. We won. The president won by 14,000 votes in North Carolina, and they developed a strategy after that to make sure that President Obama and Democrats never again win a presidential election in North Carolina. And so the Tea Party emerged, and they got active. They became well-funded. They had a national network. They were very vocal and won the legislative races in 2010, came back in 12 and won the governor's mansion. But they still couldn't execute their agenda. And you know why? Because of the Voting Rights Act. Section 5 was standing in their way.
Right.
But then June 25th, when by a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court struck down the provisions that enable Section 5, that's when the floodgate opened and all of this discriminatory legislation got passed. And so the only way to stop it now is to go into the federal courts and ask for a review of these decisions.
What about the Congress? Could the Congress do a new Voting Rights Act? Let me show you Congressman James Sensenbrenner, who said as a Republican he would fight to restore the Voting Rights Act. Let me show you this.
I am committed to restoring the Voting Rights Act as an effective tool to prevent discrimination, more subtle discrimination now than overt discrimination. This is something that has to be done by the end of the year so that a revised and constitutional Voting Rights Act is in place before the 2014 election season, both primaries and general elections.
Can that happen by the end of the year, Congressman?
It can happen. I'm cautiously optimistic. As you know, I'm the vice chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and chair of the Voting Rights Committee of the caucus. And we've put together some recommendations that we've given to Nancy Pelosi and Jim Clyburn and Steny Hoyer. And they have those, and they're in negotiation right now with Eric Cantor and Mr. Sensenbrenner, whom you just saw a minute ago. We have dozens of Republican congressmen who were in Congress in 2006 when we extended the Voting Rights Act then. And I believe these men and women who voted for it in 06 do not want to be inconsistent with their votes. They don't want to send the wrong message. And I believe at the end of the day, the 202 Democrats in Congress will support it, and another 20 to 30 or 40 Republicans will support it. We only need 218 for passage. I believe it will happen by the end of the year.
We're going to keep pressure on, Reverend
Al, and that's why we're having these 13 rallies in the 13 congressional districts to call on them, the Congress people, to do the right thing. And it's also why we must put this pressure on. The day that Shelby case came down, Senator Apodaca said, now that the headache has been removed, we're going to do what we want to do. He described the bill that was written in Medgar Evers' blood as a headache. And so that is why we must fight. That's why we've also written a letter to the Attorney General, why we filed a lawsuit in federal court with the Advancement Project, and why we're doing everything we must to not allow them to turn this country back or this state back.
Well, that's why a couple of 100,000 of us said it on Saturday. You've been doing it every Monday. We're going to keep on for the good of the country. Congressman G.K. Butterfield and Reverend Dr. William Barber,